In this video, we're going to look at bankruptcy case filings by year and state since 1990. All the data used today it comes from the Administrative Office of the United States Courts, and it includes cases filed under all chapters of the Bankruptcy Code, and both business and non-business cases, although about 97% of these are non-business or consumer cases. This first chart shows total filings by year nationwide. And you can see that starting in 1990, there were about 800,000 cases were filed. This rose to nearly a million by 1992, dropped off for the next couple of years, and then we had a big increase going up to about 1998, where we got up to well over a million cases per year. A couple of years of drop off, several more years of increases where filings were then over 1.5 million per year. Small decline in 2004, huge jump in 2005, which was the year of bankruptcy reform. That was followed by a 70% decline the next year, and 4 years of increases and 5 years of decline since then. And the net effect of all this is that filings in 2015 were about the same as what they were in 1990, although it was kind of a roller coaster ride to get there. First, we're going to look at the period from 1990 through 1994. During this period, filings were up 2 years and down 2 years, but overall the changes weren't too large. Now, there'll be a series of color-coded maps, and on all of these, white will indicates a decrease of over 10% from the prior year. Yellow is a very modest decrease of under 10%. Blue would be an increase of 0 to 20%, and then red would be a large increase of over 20%. And I use these cutoff points because it makes it roughly equal over time of use of each color. Okay, so starting with 1990 is the baseline, and looking what happened in 1991, there's about 21% increase nationwide. The increase was particularly large along the East Coast, and you had most of the rest of the country is in the blue area, which indicates a modest increase. 1992, the rate of increase, filings were still going up, but the rate of increase slowed quite a bit, and about half the states had increases during the year, and about half had declines. Virtually all are blue and white, which means that, or blue and yellow, which means that the rate of change, whether up or down, wasn't too much during the year. 93, virtually everywhere was down. It was about 10% decline nationwide, but large parts of the country, the rate was higher than that. And Hawaii was really the only state that even had an increase during that year. 94 is mostly declines again, mostly yellow, which is small declines. A few scattered states in the southeast and northwest had small increases, but the overall trend was down nationwide. And comparing 1994 to 1990, the overall change was only a 6.4% increase. Generally, filings were up along the east and the west coasts, the blue and red, and down the rest of the country with the heaviest declines coming from basically from Oklahoma up through Idaho. Okay, the next period shows there were 4 very large increases from 95 through 1998. In 1995 is 11% increase nationwide. Most of the country was under 20%. Only a few states were above 20%, but basically everyone was up. 1996 was a very large increase nationwide. It was also, this was the first year that filings reached a million nationwide. In 1997, there was another fairly large increase with the biggest increases, the red showing up in the Northeast, actually all the way over to Michigan. 98, it was more about half and half. There was a modest increase nationwide, and about half the states are colored blue on this, but generally there wasn't much change going on up or down anywhere. If we look at the overall change from 1994 to 1998, it was a 73% increase. About 15 states doubled during that time, the states in red. But there's no real strong geographic pattern for any region during that period. Okay, then in 1999 and 2000, we had modest declines in the country, although some pockets had larger declines. But just about everybody's go down in 1999, and particularly Northeast was showing big declines in 2000. Although from Pennsylvania through Louisiana, almost all the Southeast, and particularly the high Chapter states where there's a lot of Chapter 13 cases, had small increases during that period. Okay, if we look at the period from 2000 to 2003, we see three more increases and filings jumped over 1.5 million cases, and you can see that 1996 was the first year we even hit 1 million, and by 2002 we were up over 1.5 million. 2001 was a recession year. There were basically modest increases along the East Coast, and throughout the central part of the country the increases were fairly large. 2002, the rate of increase was much lower, although just about everywhere was up. But the rate, there was no part of the country that was getting really large increases during that year. Pretty much the same thing in 2003, with the exception of Colorado. In 2000, if we compare 2003 to 2000, the overall increase was about a third, although some states had very large increases during that time, particularly Colorado, Michigan, and Ohio went up at least 2/3. And of note, I think, is California, which actually went down 1% during that time. Okay, then we get to the period 2004-2006, where things got kind of interesting. 2004, filings were starting to go down across the country, and most of the states are colored yellow, which means small declines during the year. And if historical patterns had continued, we would have seen the same thing in 2005. Instead, there was a 30% increase nationwide, and this was really stimulated by the surge in filings prior to bankruptcy reform. It was signed in April and took effect in October of 2005, and filings really soared in that time, although not as much in the Southeast, where the majority of the cases are Chapter 13 cases, because the surge in filings mainly came from Chapter 7 cases. But over 2 million cases were filed during the year, and remember that 1996 was the first year we even hit 1 million. In 2006, there was a 70% drop nationwide, and every state had a decline of at least 50% during the year, so it was a huge decrease. So using 2006 as a baseline, we look from 2006 to 2010, where filings jumped up 4 years in a row, got back to about where they had been prior to bankruptcy reform, at over 1.5 million cases per year. 2007, a large increase pretty much everywhere. In 2007, 8, and 9, all 3 years we had more than 30% increase each year, which is the first time in history that had ever happened. 2010, there was a smaller decline. It was only about 8%, or increase, I'm sorry, about 8% nationwide, and a good portion of the country, basically from Michigan down through the south, actually had modest declines during the year. Now, the net effect of these 5 years of the increases from 2006 to 2010 was that filings rose 158%. And in most of the South, the rate of increase was fairly low, below 100%. The red states' filings more than tripled, and particularly had just huge increases in California, Nevada, Arizona, and Florida. These are also the four hardest states that were hit hardest during the recession. That the official time for that was 2007 to 2008, but it was felt in the bankruptcy courts all the way through 2010. Okay, that brings us to the most recent period, and starting in 2010, when filings were over 1.5 million, we've had 5 annual declines, and overall filings have dropped by about one half. If we look 2011, virtually everywhere, every state showed a decline that year, and most states are in the white, so they had large declines of over 10%. Same thing in 12, 13, and 14. Basically every state is declining, and the national rate of decline is over 10% each year. In 2015, the rate of decline slowed down a little bit. It was 9.9%. The West Coast still was showing relatively large decreases, and also most of New England. For the rest of the country, it was more modest declines. And actually, during the year, Alabama showed an increase, which first state to increase in a number of years. Looking at the cumulative change from between 2010 and 2015, nationwide filings were down 47%. The rate of decline was a lot lower in the Southeast, and these tend to be high proportion of Chapter 13 cases. North Dakota down 65%, and out west the declines were fairly high throughout really the Ninth Circuit, but Nevada, Arizona, and California, which were 3 states that had the highest run-up, have had the biggest drop-off since then. Now, if we look at, what's happened over 25 years? Nationwide, filings have only increased, it's an 8% increase, although you can see that virtually every year the rate of change is way more than 8%, but the net effect of the ups and downs is pretty much a wash. There are certain states that have had, the states in white have had the biggest declines, so North Dakota, Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Alaska have had very large declines. And then a few states in the red have had very large increases. Delaware, although a lot of that is Chapter 11 work, Maryland, New Jersey, and Michigan have had extremely large increases over the 25-year period. Now, if we look at the first half of 2016, the rate of decline is a lot lower. It's only about 6%. The West Coast, we're still seeing fairly large declines over year. But we're also seeing a lot of, about 15 states are color blue now, which shows that filings have started to increase. So it seems that the trends are reversing, and where I think this will go is by 2017, filings will be going up in most states after what will be 6 years of declines. I think the rate of increase will be fairly modest, and we will stay under a million cases nationwide in 2017 and probably 2018, unless something happens, either if the economy enters a recession, or legislative change, for example, something affecting student loan discharge, could rapidly change what the trends are. But otherwise, I think filings between 800,000 and a million in the next couple of years is probably what we're going to see, which is well below what the filing rate for most of the last 25 years. So that's my analysis of total filings trends, and I hope it's helpful.